On the pod today, the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. Mayor, welcome to Pod Save America.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you and Killer Mike delivered two of the most viral and I thought powerful impromptu speeches over the weekend about these protests, and they both happened to be at a press conference that you organized. Can you give us the backstory of how that came together, how you decided who to invite, and sort of what was going through your mind before you spoke?
So I'll tell you. Friday was a whirlwind. I spent most of the day on Friday participating in congressional testimony with some other mayors on COVID-19, and I had on the evening news, and it just started not to look good.
Mm.
Um, so I eventually made my way down to police headquarters, and I wish that I could even remember the sequence of events, but I immediately knew to reach out to Killer Mike and to Ti, because I know I have four kids, and I know my voice is not always heard or listened to, and that I had to get somebody who could say the things that needed to be said that I knew would probably wouldn't be received if I said it. And we went into the press conference, and I didn't, I honestly couldn't remember what I said after I said it. I had to, after I came home that night, I watched it on television. And, I'm a woman of faith. I think those words were divinely given to me in that moment. And Killer Mike, I mean, I could sit at his feet all day long.
I know.
He talks that way sitting in a barbershop. But I think, the thing that the common thread with myself and Killer Mike and with Tip, we bleed Atlanta. We love this city, and we hurt with this city, and the pain and the frustration is felt by so many people across America. And I think you got it from us in real time on Friday.
Your job seems incredibly difficult right now. Ahmaud Arbery was murdered in Georgia. You called that a lynching. You said George Floyd's murder made you hurt like a mother would. You obviously feel the anger and the pain that protesters feel. On the other hand, your role as mayor is to keep your people safe, keep your city from being destroyed. How do you balance that?
It's hard. Um, and the reality is, if I weren't mayor, I would probably not even consume as much, because it hurts so much. And it just hurts me so much as a mother. And with Ahmaud Arbery, like, I get, it's this physical feeling I get in my stomach, and it makes me nauseous. And with George Floyd, I knew I had to watch it because I'd be asked about it, but watching it so that I can speak about it as mayor, and feeling it as I do as a mother, are two very different things. And it's interesting. I often try and look at things from the lens of my kids and how things will impact them and affect them. But I've had the most interesting conversations with my mother over the past few days. And my mother had said to me last week that this doesn't feel like 1965 in America. It feels like something before 1965. And that struck me, because my mother grew up in the segregated South in
Yeah.
Atlanta. And then when I spoke to her yesterday, I can count on one hand the number of times I've ever heard or seen my mother cry outside of the death of a family member, of loved one. My mother sobbed yesterday, and she sobbed talking about George Floyd, and um, imagining that being my brother or being one of her grandsons. And I share that to say there's this anger and this frustration and this sadness that we see in this very visible way with young people in our streets. but so many people are feeling it across America. And when I look at police officers taking a knee with protesters, I know that people are being heard. I just, my fear on Friday, and my fear remains that the voices will be drowned out by the destruction. And we got so much work to do.
You said on Friday night that a protest has purpose. What specific goals do you think should be the purpose of these protests?
Well, I think the first purpose has to be to draw attention. But I also think that on the other side, it's got to be a tangible point of satisfaction. The reality is there will be another Black man who dies in America at the hand of police officers. I wish that it weren't so, and I pray that it's not so, but it will likely happen. And we've got to know where we trying to go with this. So, under the Obama administration, the same way the pandemic handbook was left, there were reforms that were left on policing in America, and the launch of My Brother's Keeper, and all these great initiatives that had tangible outcomes. And when I spoke on Friday and I talked about the west side of Atlanta, what's happening on the west side of Atlanta is we've got job training programs, we've got substance abuse programs, we've got wraparound services, we've got police officers who, when they are recruited into our police department, have to volunteer at our At Promise Youth Center on the west side of Atlanta. Those are the things that have to happen across America. And we've got to have some tangible metrics on what does it mean? Are we trying to reduce incarceration like we're doing in Atlanta by turning our jail into an equity center? Are we trying to measure how many more people get jobs and become financially literate, et cetera? I mean, there's so many metrics that we've got to be able to articulate. And I think the uprising and the protest is one part of it. But we've got to know what is it we're trying to get to on the other side of it.
You fired 2 officers this weekend for excessive use of force against young people who were out past curfew. Do you have thoughts on how to reform policing in a way to prevent that excessive force in the first place?
Yeah, there is a culture change. And I can tell you, had that happened last week, I wouldn't have watched the video likely. I would have seen the video that was on television, but I would not have spent 4 to 5 hours of my afternoon yesterday watching 7 different body cams, 5, 7 times each. And because even for as conscientious as I am, there are things that, you go, well, that was horrible. Let's investigate and let's go through all these hoops. But with where we are in America, we don't have time to wait. So my police officers just got a very real lesson on what our expectations and our level of tolerance will be in the city going forward. The force was excessive. They got to be fired, period. And I think that those are the type changes and expectations that we've got to be as leaders to give to our police officers, but also that level of expectation to our communities, because nobody has patience with waiting.
So at one point in your speech on Friday night, you said, if you want change in America, go and register to vote. New York Times interviewed a young woman who was protesting in South Carolina over the weekend, and she said the following about voting: I just don't think that's how change happens. They've been telling us to do that for so long, and we've done it, and look at everything that's still going on. What do you say to that young woman and young people like that who just feel so frustrated that they don't see the difference that their participation in democracy can actually make?
The words of Audre Lorde have been on my mind all day. Revolution's not a one-time event. And my fear with where we are with Donald Trump as president, even when I look at my kids, I look at my twins are 9, they're my youngest. They don't remember President Obama being president. they know about them, but they don't remember what that feels like. And that there being this concept of hope coming out of the White House. And I think that what we're seeing with our, especially our young protesters across the country, um, they don't have the patience for these things that need that for the change. So I think you've got to give them quick deliverables, like we've done in Atlanta. First 3 months in office, I eliminated cash bail bond in our city. We're working to turn our jail into a center of equity. We closed our doors to ICE. COVID-19 hit, we started delivering meals to our seniors and our kids who aren't getting their meals. So I think that gives you instant credibility, but it also gives you grace to plan long term for this work that we know it doesn't happen overnight. It's a series of actions and policy decisions that end up changing America. But I think you've got to have a combination of both. And I think you got to be able to establish credibility with young people across America, because they're hopeless right now.
Yeah.
And thinking about my grandparents who came to Atlanta, my grandmother's grandparents were slaves in Crawfordsville, Georgia. And I've heard that my grandmother's grandfather served in Congress during Reconstruction. I don't know if it's true or not. This is a freed slave. I've seen his worth listed on a registry. There was something that gave him hope, that even when he was enslaved in the cotton fields of East Georgia, there was something that gave him hope that something could be better, if not for him, than for his children's children. And I think that's where we are in America. We've got to be able to give our kids and our communities hope, because even with my 18-year-old, with all the trappings that come along with being the mayor's son, sent me the video of the kids, the college kids, being pulled out of the car over the weekend, and he said, "This is why we're burning down our cities. This is what we're mad about." So,
And what did you tell him when he said that?
I said, I understand. The one thing that I've learned as a parent, and I'm learning more and more every day, sometimes it's just an opportunity for me to acknowledge that he's hurting.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes I just have to say, I understand. And I do. And when I see that anger and frustration in my son, because the reality is when he walks out the door, it doesn't matter that he's my son. He's still, what I call him, my man child in America. And he has as big of a target on him as anybody else's child.
You wisely said over the weekend that Donald Trump should just stop talking because he makes things worse. I agree. Um, Last question: what would you want to hear from a real president right now? What do you think the country needs to hear to heal and to sort of get through this moment?
What I want to hear is that we have a president who believes that we're better than this. And I want to hear from our president a genuine care and concern and commitment to make change in our communities. I want to hear an acknowledgement that we're hurting, and that this hurt didn't start yesterday. It didn't start a week or so ago with the killing of George Floyd. This is 400 years of hurt and pain, and the need for reconciliation and reformation in this country. That's what I want to hear from our president. I want to hear our president say, I may not have all of the answers, and it may not all work out for us today, but I believe there's a better tomorrow. And I'm going to do everything I can as president to make sure that that better tomorrow is what all of our children deserve. And I'm a sucker for a good quote. One of my favorite lines is from a poem from Maya Angelou, and she says, "I am the hope of the slave." And I think there has to be a president who says to communities of color, especially in this country, you come from a legacy of hurt and pain, but there was hope that your forefathers had for you. And as president, I have that same hope for you. And I'm going to make sure that America stands up to its commitment, that we are better than where we are today.
Well, I hope we hear words like that soon myself. Thank you, Mayor, so much for your powerful words. Thank you for your leadership.